I wore red today because their colors are red and white, and maybe next time I'll do white, but I like the red character, so we're doing that now. I do like both of them though. I'm really excited to read more. We're doing chapter 5. It's my first time with the mic, which was such a pain to figure out if it worked. Look, my earrings are bows. Isn't that so cute? Okay. Yeah. New mic. Please let me know if you think it sounds better or worse, or if you think I need to be closer to the mic, which would be a hassle for my setup. But yeah, let me know. Okay, we are gonna start. Ugh, and I'm sorry if I sound like mucusy because I'm still getting over whatever happened at Katsu. Yay. Okay. Like I'm doing the lymphatic drainage massages because there's just so much mucus stuck. Okay. Oh, I already forgot how to say their names. Yu Shengyan, Fu Wenqing, Yu Shengyan. Okay, I still got it. Okay. Chapter 5, House Arcane. Wait, I kind of want to find out, what does arcane mean? It means understood by few, mysterious, or secret. Okay. The arcane order had the ring of a mysterious place filled with people well versed in mystic divination, busy peering into fate's design. But it was nothing of the sort. Their leader. What is this? ZH Chinese J. J. Okay. Zhang Tian. Their leader, Zhang Tian, wielded a brutish battle axe, while his sons fought with hefty broadswords. And though their weapons differed, the core of their arts were the same. Dim candlelight flickered through the morning hall. The Zhang brothers grieved openly, cursing this shameless assailant for their deceit, but neither of them mentioned Yu Shengyan even once. Clearly, they'd forgotten that Yu Shengyan was the only person in the world with mastery of the unseen sword. If she'd been a man, or a very ugly woman, the brothers most likely would have cursed her name until they were blue in the face. But Yu Shengyan's beauty was such that virtually all men felt their hearts skip a beat at the sight of her, just as when they beheld Fu Wenqing's magnificence, that red and fiery rose in full bloom. The unseen sword was incredibly swift, swift as a shooting star, or perhaps even quicker. The unseen sword was impossibly light, light as mist on the river, or perhaps even softer. Who could possibly have used the unseen sword forms other than Yu Shengyan? With her chin perched on her hand, Fu Wenqing molded over from her seat in the pavilion on the lake. She wanted to ask Yu Shengyan, who was sitting right beside her, but she knew she wouldn't answer. It was possible she didn't even know herself. A crimson maple leaf drifted to the water's surface, carried by a gentle breeze, a few more fluttering into the pavilion itself. One of the leaves was suddenly sliced to ribbons, so swiftly it seemed to blur. It was like a handful of dust thrown into the air. "Nice work," came a shout from somewhere close by. Fu Wenqing looked up through her lashes, lips rising in an alluring curve. She arranged her hair a little, her gaze flicking over the two young men in mourning garb, standing on the red bridge. Of course, she knew who they were, and she'd noticed their surreptitious glances for a while now. She reveled in their admiring stares, but when she remembered Yu Shengyan was seated beside her, her pleasure was marred by a twinge of displeasure. The Zhang brothers approached, beaming. Struck by the force of a beautiful woman's grin, they'd forgotten all their troubles, including that their father's coffin. Sorry, I got a text. Including that their father's coffin still lay inside the hall. They were full brothers by blood, but they didn't really look it. Zhang Shilling, the elder, was handsome and refined and looked just like his mother, while the younger Zhang Shishu was as wide and stocky as a caveman, much like his father. They drew near the pavilion, but dared not step inside. Fu Wenqing was gorgeous, but her beauty was thorny and untamed. The Zhang brothers had enough self-awareness to know they couldn't handle someone like her, but controlling one's eyes in the face of temptation was no easy task. Their gazes slid from Fu Wenqing only to meet the cool regard of the white-robed woman beside her, Yu Shengyan. Shock flared to life in their eyes. They were both staunch admirers of Yu Shengyan, so of course they recognized her face. They were stunned beyond belief that a goddess like her could appear before them in the flesh. They knew it was her, but the questions that realization raised nearly made them disbelieve it. They looked back at Fu Wenqing in confusion. Fu Wenqing knew exactly what they were thinking. She smiled. It's convincing, isn't it? Realization dawned. The brothers nodded furiously. Zhang Xiling thought himself very clever. My lady, your skills at disguise have grown even better. Fu Wenqing was known for her outrageous behavior, and so Zhang Xiling had no trouble assuming she disguised her handmaiden as Yu Shengyan. Fu Wenqing and Yu Shengyan could not share the same sky, surely. Fu Wenqing was so haughty that she couldn't bear those who equaled her. Her pride demanded she excise every one of them and trample them beneath her feet. Only Fu Wenqing was permitted to stand on the highest peak. Zhang Xiling wanted to praise her, but he couldn't bear to say anything unflattering about Yu Xingyan. In the end, he lowered his head and stood in silence. Fu Wenqing noticed the brothers had stared much longer at Yu Shengyan than at her. Even though they even though they thought she was an imposter, the sight of a face that looked just like Yu Shengyan's still enchanted them. While their eyes were fixed on her, though, Yu Shengyan only gazed into the mist-veiled mountains in the distance. Fu Wenqing felt a sudden urge to get to. I actually got made fun of for pronouncing this word wrong. I'm pretty sure it's gouge the brother's eyes out, right? Okay, whatever. Make fun of me if I get it wrong. She felt a sudden urge to gouge the brothers' eyes out. Is she jealous because she wants their eyes on her, or because she doesn't want other eyes on her woman? Because I relate to both. Lesbian problem. She flung her cup down. Well, I don't want men's eyes, but people, attention. She flung her cup down on the stone table, jerking the men from their reverie. She chuckled at their confusion. Shouldn't you be managing the arcane orders of fairs out in the front hall? What are you two? I'm adding words. What are you still doing here? Have you taken a fancy to the beauty by my side? Who would dare covet someone close to Fu Wenqing? Even if they did, they could never express it openly. They plastered smiles on their faces, cupped their hands, and turned to leave, although their slow, shuffling steps betrayed the depth of their reluctance. The old one and the young ones are the same breed of coward, Fu Wenqing scoffed as she watched them go. Nothing worth looking at here. The wind whispered a series of ripples across the lake. Sitting in that autumn breeze, Fu Wenqing found herself a little bored. Yu Shengyan stood peacefully beside her, so unobtrusive one could forget she was there. Even when she looked straight at you, it felt like those serene eyes were looking through you, at something far in the distance. Fu Wenqing had power, wealth, fame, and beauty praised by thousands, but she still felt a hollowness in her heart. Something was missing. Was it a worthy opponent? Fu Wenqing had one right in front of her, but she wouldn't unsheath her sword. Fu Wenqing stood up. I hear the unseen sword is the greatest blade in the Jianghu. I also hear that Yu Shengyan, high priestess of the demonic guild, is the Jianghu's greatest swordswoman. Yu Shengyan glanced over Fu Wenqing's beaming face. I promise to stay by your side, she said coolly, but I will not duel you. I've already changed my mind, said Fu Wenqing. I don't want to duel. After all, it's not like I'm the only person in the Jianghu who hasn't seen your unseen sword. The hem of her sleeve slipped down as she pressed her fingertips to the underside of Yu Shengyan's jaw. She leaned in as if to kiss her on the mouth, only to turn aside. I'm keeping you here to give you a good show, she said with a giggle. 3 months is more than enough. Yu Shengyan turned away from the heat of Fu Wenqing's breath, her lips brushing Fu Wenqing's cheek as she did so. She barely seemed to register it. She simply replied to Fu Wenqing, her voice unchanging. A good show? Fu Wenqing narrowed her eyes and let go of Yu Shengyan's face, drawing back to unconsciously touch that spot on her cheek. Something indescribable rose in her heart, but Fu Wenqing had the discipline to keep it off her face. A wonderful show indeed. In 3 months, the so-called Light Path Alliance will come crashing down, and your demonic guild will collapse from the inside out. Won't that be a lovely spectacle? Coming from anyone else, that proclamation would be chalked up as the ravings of a madwoman, but this was Fu Wenqing. In spite of yourself, you couldn't help believing her. She was the alliance leader Fu Hui's daughter, and no one knew her true desires or her true activities. If she hadn't been a Fu, everyone would see her as a demoness in human flesh, albeit a very beautiful demoness indeed. As Fu Wenqing carefully watched for Yu Shengyan's reaction, disappointment slowly overtook her. Yu Shengyan's face was emotionless, and all that passed from her lips was a quiet exhalation of understanding, as if neither the Light Path Alliance nor the Jadewater Guild had anything to do with her. The most terrifying enemies were those who cared for nothing at all. Even if it was all an act, it was still that was still frightening. Fu Wenqing felt goose flesh pebble her skin as she watched Yu Shengyan. There arose in her the desire to strike her dead, and killing intent followed in its wake. Yu Shengyan sensed it, but she only brushed a fallen maple leaf from Fu Wenqing's shoulder. The gesture abruptly snuffled out Fu Wenqing's murderous whims. She felt a little dejected, as if she'd lost without even drawing her sword. Loss was a foreign concept to her, she who should be perfect and without flaw. Fu Wenqing sighed softly. If I exist, why did the world have to create a Yu Shengyan? Staring at the waters of the lake and the fiery maple forest, Fu Wenqing found herself suddenly longing to play the xiao. She recalled that Qin music from their first meeting. What if they played together? Okay, chapter 6, third in line. These lashes are hurting my eyes. An unwanted guest had come to the arcane order, a masked woman dressed in all black. Though she pitched her voice low and referred to herself as the third young master, anyone with eyes could tell she was a woman. There was likely a sumptuous figure hidden beneath those dowdy black robes. She was considered an unwanted guest because she charged in uninvited, and although she was unarmed, every arcane order disciple had collapsed as she drew close. Which order do you belong to? Name yourself, shouted Zhang Shishu. I'm guessing that's how it's pronounced. Stepping forward angrily. Zhang Shiling stood beside his brother. You dare not show your face? Are you hiding something unspeakable? The Zhang brothers were always together, even when facing an enemy. Wind tossed their clothes, and their hands were already on the hilts of the broadswords on their backs. Their faces were set in grim lines, heralding the arrival of a terrible storm. They did not imagine this intruder had come to pay their respects. And indeed she had not. The third young master had come for revenge. She scoured the brothers, one broad and one skinny, and mockery caught a light in her eyes. She thought little of the arcane order's disciples. And of these two men. The guests had long since departed. Something about a conference at the House of Valor over how best to face the Jadewater Guild. Apart from those useless disciples, these two cowardly lechers were the only people who remained at the arcane order. Indignant fury blazed to life in the third master's eyes. She strode into the hall, ignoring the broadswords that swept toward her head. Though the sharp blades were wreathed in force, they never reached their target. Wreathed? I've never read that. Wreathed in force. Okay. Slender hands caught both massive swords, that impossible might slamming to a halt against creamy, delicate fingers. A flush crawled up the Zhang brothers' faces. Inside, they quailed with pain as the third young master's true chi poured into their bodies through the hilts of their swords. With two loud clangs, both of them collapsed to the ground. The third young master leaped into the morning hall. Her hands tightened into fists. As she stared at the coffin, the look in her eyes went from rage to serenity. The third young master slid to her knees on top of a nearby prayer mat and performed 3 deep and reverential kowtows. The Zhang brothers clambered back to their feet, astonished to see the third young master performing such formal rites. The tension melted from their faces, and their eyes curved into crescents. They cupped their hands. A friend, then. My apologies for the earlier offense never made it out of their mouths. Their smiles stiffened and their faces paled. The third young master had stood up, and her powerful eyes flared with unrivaled killing intent. Her hand rested on the lid of the coffin. The slightest push would reveal Zhang Tian's corpse. Tears glittered at the corners of her eyes, though the brothers couldn't tell if they were from grief or delight. She no longer bothered to hide the tinkling chime of her voice. I've returned what I owe. Now the debt must be repaid. The brothers charged with a howl, swords flashing. They came at her from both sides, their blades stirring up a gale that scraped at her skin and poured true chi into their hands, devoting all their strength to killing the villain before them. The third young master didn't fight back. Amid the storm of sword glares, she flew nimbly away like a butterfly through flowers. Then, with a flick of her fingers, she sent both their swords flying from their hands. The brothers stared, stricken silent, not because they'd lost, but because the finger flick attack was a closed practice of the Zhang family. Zhang Shishu's voice shook. Who are you? How do you know the finger flick attack? Wailed Zhang Shiling. The two of them knew of it, but they had shamefully failed to master it themselves. Unimportant, they figured. At worst, the technique would die with them. But seeing it performed by an outsider filled both with a crushing shame that quickly transformed into aggressive fury. Their hands tightened into fists, knuckles creaking, but they knew very well that the third young master had been merciful. If she really wanted them dead, they would have already been slaughtered 10 times over. An arcane order disciple came staggering into the hall. Young masters! Hurry! Go to the back courtyard and find Lady Fu! Shouted Zhang Shishu. Hurry! And report to the House of Valor that the demonic guild has invaded the arcane order. That one was Zhang Shiling. They didn't know who this woman was, or whether she actually belonged to the demonic guild, but the thought of having Fu Wenqing nearby eased their minds. No woman existed whom Fu Wenqing could not defeat. Now the brothers looked upon the third young master with smugness, cut with purity. At the mere mention of Fu Wenqing's name, cut with pity. Hello? Do you want to say hi to the live? Do you want to say hi? I have a guest. He has one eye. This is Finn. What? Oh, he gets nibbles at night, like extra treats because he's cat anxiety. Sir, ooh, what was that? He just burped in the mic. So, are you getting cat ASMR? Oh, I can smell the burp. Smells like his dinner. All right, you're being evicted. Sit right there. He has a really long tail. Sir, I'm in the middle of something. Okay, we're getting back to business. He is such a loud purr. Okay. Can you please? The problem is like he's not gonna quit. Okay. I'm just gonna unless I ignore him. And it's so sad to ignore him. The cat nibbles at night or because he's like he still has like sometimes he acts a little feral, so it's to like show him human contact is good. So then he comes up and he's super sweet at night because he wants his nibbles. So it's good, reinforces it because otherwise he's kind of a scaredy cat. But he's very food motivated, as you can see. Sir. Okay. Now the brothers looked. Sir, stop. You can't go up there. Okay, you're getting evicted. You're getting evicted for real this time. Now the brothers looked upon the third young master with smugness, cut with pity. At the mere mention of Fu Wenqing's name, they'd convinced themselves that this third young master was done for. Young master, Lady Fu left a long time ago, wailed the disciple. The smiles disappeared. Fear glimmered in their eyes. It was the third young master's turn to grin. The Zhang brothers lowered their heads. How had Fu Wenqing slipped away? But then again, she was like that, coming and going without a trace. Of course she wouldn't bother and let the hosts know. She wouldn't bother to let the hosts know. If it hadn't been for Fu Hui, she probably wouldn't even have bothered to come at all. The House of Flowing Gold, the Mansion of Beauties, the Bamboo Viewing Pavilion, Fu Wenqing might show up anywhere, but she wouldn't stick around at the morning hall. She didn't care for that kind of thing, so she left. After a bath, she'd changed into clean robes, neat and tidy. Fu Wenqing allowed herself not the slightest flaw, especially not in front of Yu Shengyan. Night had fallen. Lantern light played in the glow of the moon, lifting the darkness of the lake. As the autumn breeze came and went, the water's surface rippled and shone. Lilting song filled the air like the piping of an oriole. courtesy of the talented beauties from the House of Flowing Gold who'd been invited in by wealthy men. Perfumed makeup mingled with the fragrance of wind. Rough breathing rang counterpoint to raucous. I'm gonna find out how to pronounce that. Raucous. He's eating stuff on the floor. Oh my god, I'm sorry. This is like the most messy one I've done so far. Now he's stepping on my Wang Shan print that I haven't framed yet. Okay. Raucous laughter, a scene of dissolute debauchery. The harmonies of a Qin and Shao drifted suddenly from a single exquisite pleasure boat drifting across Shushi Lake. All other sounds faded away, leaving only their duet to echo across the water. The Qin rang clear and crispy, the Shao played sweet and mellow. Then the music came to an abrupt stop. A smile was fixed on Fu Wenqing's face, but she'd crushed the Shao in her hand to dust. Yu Shengyan sat serenely across from her, hands drawn away from the Qin and back into her sleeves. Any listener would have found their duet melodious and beautiful. But Fu Wenqing knew Yu Shengyan's playing had dominated her own. The sound of that Qin had enveloped her completely, pulling her into Yu Shengyan's realm of reserved distance. But Fu Wenqing refused to admit defeat. Hello, Sarge is here. I'm reading the Baihe right now, and I'm on chapter 6, so if you don't want it spoiled, that's a warning. You might want to start with the other one, but if you actually don't care to read this one, then you're welcome to stay. Okay. But Fu Wenqing refused to admit defeat. She licked her lips and laughed. Yu Shengyan, in the next 3 months, you're not allowed to play the Qin in front of me. She knew Yu Shengyan would agree to any request she made, as long as it wasn't a duel. How had the Jadewater Guild, said to be the worst among demons, produced someone so wonderful? Fu Wenqing was struck by a desire to visit the home of the Jadewater Guild, Green Jade Isle, but she dismissed it quickly. There was something more important she had to do. She couldn't ruin her whole plan just for Yu Shengyan. If someone else made these requests of you, said Fu Wenqing, would you still say yes? Yu Shengyan glanced at her. There is no one else, she said mildly. Oh. Fu Wenqing laughed again, this time at herself. Was she really expecting flattery from Yu Shengyan? Described positively, her responses were ethereally bloodless. Less positively, she was stiff as a board and just as dull. Yu Shengyan of the Unseen Sword, High Priestess Yu Shengyan of the Demonic Guild, who exactly was she? Could that unchanging face show no other emotions? Fu Wenqing refused to believe it. She sauntered over and deposited herself again in Yu Shengyan's lap, wrapping her arms around her neck and making her take all her weight. She could count every one of her lowered lashes. Yu Shengyan remained impassive, but her own heart skipped a beat. To her furious shame, she was overcome by an impulse she could hardly believe. Fu Wenqing pressed her mouth to Yu Shengyan's. Whoa! Yu Shengyan's expression didn't change, but Fu Wenqing let herself go red. There's a hair on my face. It's bothering me. When she pulled away, she couldn't even make herself smile anymore. She needed to get out of Yu Shengyan's lap, but a sudden grip on her waist pinned her tight. Yu Shengyan drew closer until all distance between them disappeared. The touch of her lips was as light as a dragonfly skimming water. Then she abruptly pulled away. She blinked. Just like that. Fu Wenqing's voice came out as a humiliated snarl. Why are you toying with me? Toying with you? Yu Shengyan pronounced the words carefully, eyes never leaving Fu Wenqing's face. There was a plaintive note to her voice. Didn't you kiss me first? Talking to Yu Shengyan was frustrating, but being interrupted by a random nobody in the middle of talking to Yu Shengyan was infuriating. Fu Wenqing wasn't an agreeable woman. She was, in fact, irascible and ruthless. When it came down to it, she lived by one principle and one principle only. Piss her off and she'd kill you. Fu Wenqing slid off Yu Shengyan's lap, the rosy sunset flush gone from her face. That captivating smile promised only murder. She brushed non-existent dust from her clothes, but her eyes remained fixed on the hulking man who stood on the stern of the boat. He was around 40 or so, his chin covered in black stubble. A gnarled scar covered his right cheek, and a chunk of iron chain lay against his gray cloth robes. His eyes narrowed in apoplectic fury. Shameless bitch! He spat viciously on the ground, gaze full of scorn. Yu Shengyan turned to Fu Wenqing. An acquaintance of yours? She asked lightly. Fu Wenqing recognized him, though she'd hardly call them acquaintanced. He was one of the few men whose heart wasn't enraptured with her, because it was crammed to the brim with hatred instead. He'd taken a terrible defeat at her hands. This burly man, one Ma San, had made a name for himself in their circles. He was known as the Iron Monk. He'd once been a disciple of the Shaolin Monastery, and when he'd left, he'd joined the Guanxi Convoy, a convoy company in the Wei Yang Company's network, as an escort captain. Those within the Jianghu respected him, as he'd gone over a decade without a single loss, but that had all changed last year. Not only did he lose his job, he'd also lost his pride. He'd been given that scar on his face by the same person who'd hijacked his convoy, a constant reminder of his humiliation. He'd been escorting a Jade Guanyin statue personally carved by the clever hands Lu Qi, the finest artisan in the world. Never mind delivering it to the hands of the young lady of the House of Valor, he never even made it out of Guanxi. Ma San had been forced to watch as his escort was hijacked on his own territory. It wasn't just an affront to his own pride, it was a mark of shame for the entire Wei Yang Company alliance. Their head captain couldn't even look Fu Hui in the eye anymore. Losing Lady Fu's birthday present was unspeakably embarrassing, unbearably so. But who would have imagined that the hijacker was Lady Fu herself? Ever since then, Ma Sung had been investigating the incident, bent on clearing his name, and his discoveries were beyond belief. Ma Sun shook off his memories, snapping out the chain he held close to his chest. It was a chained blade, one he'd had especially made. He'd merged the essence of the Shaolin Monastery's Dharma strike and the Arhat punch techniques into his blade forms, creating a martial path of his own. Everyone reveres you as the young lady of the House of Valor, but I, Ma San, will not, he shouted. That facade of yours might deceive everyone else, but I, Ma San, won't be fooled. Lady Fu, you possess the heart of a snake and the mind of a scorpion, twisted and cruel. That Jade Guanyin disappeared in my keeping. You really must have been intent on ruining my reputation and my pride. You guys like my man voice? I just attempted a man voice. Fu Wenqing toyed with her hands, then smiled up at Ma San, brilliantly enough to melt his heart. When she spoke, her voice was as soft as silk sliding across skin. Ma San had never heard a woman's voice curl so sweetly before, and his expression changed instantly. He was no longer a man with a grudge. He was a man burning with machismo, wanting nothing but to pluck that thorned rose for himself. What had Fu Wenqing just said? The Jade Guanyin was already mine. What's wrong with taking custody of it a bit earlier? Ma San grinned, that terrible scar twisting his features. Yes, he panted. You did me no wrong. I've changed my mind. I don't want revenge. I want you to come with me, Lady Fu. What would it mean to have Lady Fu Wenqing for himself? It would mean power, wealth, and the pleasures of beauty. So many young lords came vying for Fu Wenqing's attention that the House of Valor's doorstep was in danger of cracking under their weight, but not a one had ever caught her eye. Ma San knew he'd never win her favor, but he trusted the chained blade in his hand. After all, no matter how the legends painted her, she was just a woman. Ma San's gaze swept from Fu Wenqing to Yu Shengyan. He stroked his coarse stubble and nodded in satisfaction, watching these women, both capable of overturning the entire Jianghu, like purchases he was about to make. Some people were a waste of the eyes in their head, and Ma San was one of them. Okay, author roasting Ma San. Fu Wenqing hadn't lost her smile, but what spilled from those crimson lips was a stream of the most vulgar malice imaginable. Who do you think you are? Why don't you piss a puddle on the ground and take a good look at your own reflection? Did you forget about that scar on your face? Ma San's bulky form flinched. Of course he hadn't forgotten. He'd never even seen the strike coming, just a flare of blue-green light, and then his face was a mess of blood. Through all of his years in the Jianghu, he'd never experienced anything like that. He was convinced his attacker had used some kind of monstrous spell. Ma San was a haughty man. Fu Wenqing's mocking disdain transformed the desire and sympathy he felt for these beautiful women into flaming rage. He is just flipping back and forth. With a crazed howl, he sent his chained blade smashing down toward her, whipping through the air to sink home with a force that could topple mountains. With a dull thunk, a body hit the ground. The chained blade whistled through the air, smashing a hole in the cabin. "My lady," came a respectful voice from outside. "Master requests you return home." Fu Wenqing smoothed out her sleeves. Glancing at the man lying in a pool of his own blood, she laughed. "Way to ruin the mood." She went on tiptoes, whirling into the air like a wisp of smoke. With a palm strike to one paper lantern, the beautiful pleasure boat went up in flames. In the light of the fire that illuminated a whole patch of the night sky, one white-robed figure swept out with utter calmness and ease. Yu Shengyan kept to her oath. She followed Fu Wenqing. Thankfully, Fu Wenqing was known for her eccentricity, and everyone in the House of Valor believed Yu Shengyan to be a disguised impostor, with the exception of the wily old fox Fu Hui, who had the penetrating eyes of a lit torch. Yu Shengyan went to wait in Fu Wenqing's chambers, while Fu Wenqing herself answered a summons to the study to discuss urgent matters. Urgent matters, meaning the Jianghu business, Fu Wenqing detested. Fu Wenqing despised the Jianghu and the leader of its Light Path Alliance, Fu Hui. Everyone in the House of Valor knew it too, but they dared not comment, and dared even less to interfere. There was too much going on there. All they could do was sigh. Fu Wenqing, no. I see Fu and I just go Wenqing. Fu Hui's brows were tightly knit, and there was a worried cast to his face. He rarely spent any time at home. He was always busy, traveling from sect to sect. He looked up in exhaustion. "The woman you brought back is the high priestess Yu Shengyan," he said, doing his best to keep his tone soft. Fu Wenqing giggled, batting her eyelashes. "So what if she is? And so what if she isn't?" The careless indifference of hers, that careless indifference of hers, always pricked at Fu Hui's temper. He took a deep breath. "The righteous and demonic factions of the Jianghu have fought for a very long time. If the high priestess Yu Shengyan is in our manor, the demonic guild must be up to something. Since she dares to walk into this trap, we must make the most of it. I'm glad you brought her here. Well done." Fu Wenqing arched an eyebrow. "Who said I was trying to catch her? She's mine. And who would dare to touch one of my people?" This was as good as admitting Yu Shengyan's identity. But what Fu Wenqing meant by it was that Yu Shengyan was under her protection and no one could harm her. Fu Wenqing's word was good, and Fu Hui knew it. Fu Wenqing got her looks from her deceased mother, but the source of her temper was a mystery. Logical reasoning, emotional appeals, none of it was ever any use with Fu Wenqing. Fu Hui's expression darkened. "If the Jianghu knew Yu Shengyan was staying safe and sound at the House of Valor, they'd think we were colluding with the demonic guild. The House of Valor's reputation would be destroyed overnight. Wenqing, this is no joking matter. I need you to restrain your little impulses. I don't expect you to do anything for the Jianghu or Light Path Alliance. I just ask that you not add to the trouble. Otherwise, I'm afraid you'll have to forgive my callousness. The Wu Lin is in enough chaos as it is. You may not have heard, but there's a strange new power rising outside of the Light Path Alliance and the Demonic Guild." Fu Wenqing scoffed, but her smile faded. She brushed back her hair, her eyes turning cold. "Dad," she murmured, "if only you'd wrung my neck when I was a baby, none of this would have happened. You've had so many chances to do it, but you missed every last one. What are you going to do now?" The illustrious hero Fu Hui was no longer Fu Wenqing's equal. The world at large might not have realized the truth, but these two knew it well. A tinkling laugh echoed through the study. Like a wisp of smoke, Fu Wenqing drifted away. A series of loud crashes rang out behind her. A pity for those inanimate objects. They'd become an outlet for Fu Hui's rage. I'm confused. She's beefing with her dad. But I don't get why. Okay. Chapter 8. Jade Guanyin. I hope you can't hear I don't know what this mic sounds like. I've never listened to anything recorded with this mic, so sorry if you get unintentional, saliva ASMR. Okay. The mid-month moon was full and round. It hung in the sky like a silver plate, dimming the light of the stars around it. By the But the time for that festival of reunion had passed. It was already the ninth month. Wind rustled past the roof eaves, loud and whistling. The stone bench was piercingly cold. Fu Wenqing only deigned to sit on it after a maidservant had put down a thick fur cushion for her. There was no need for a martial artist like her to worry about the cold, but Fu Wenqing was simply too lazy to summon true qi to warm herself. She smiled and she sighed. She stared at that full moon, suddenly reminded of the chill of winter. Her heater wasn't enough. She wanted a blazing flame to warm her through. Fu Wenqing looked down at her hands. How beautiful the moon is tonight, she said slowly. Yu Shengyan nodded. As always, she seemed as insubstantial as smoke. Fu Wenqing no longer expected any response from her. Fu Wenqing looked away slowly, up at the shadowed forests. She heard a hissing sound. Birds startled from their perches as something whizzed past, like a shooting star, darting through the night's darkness. Yu Shengyan had sensed the presence in the trees, though she'd taken no action. With Fu Wenqing here, she didn't have to. She didn't know why she'd been kept as a guest, nor did she care to find out. To her, it was simply a case of staying somewhere slightly noisier than where she'd been before, and she could ignore all the bothersome sounds if she wished. A sharp whistle pierced the sky. There was no reaction. The disciples of the House of Valor seemed to have all fallen asleep. A silhouette flashed down from the trees like a bolt of lightning. The intruder was very adept at hiding himself and terribly quick but he didn't escape the two women's scrutiny. Neither of them moved. The world remained still, as if these three people each belonged where they were. Black robes hid the man, and the shadows hid those black robes. He held no killing intent. His gaze swept over Yu Shengyan and away. He bent his knees to kneel before Fu Wenqing. So he was from the House of Valor. Internally, Yu Shengyan sighed in relief, but her brows drew close together. What did she care who this person was? Her heart should be as calm and as still as the water in a deep mountain spring. Okay, we're in Yu Shengyan's POV. Interesting. Fu Wenqing spoke only a single word, but that word was more than enough to convey her control and superiority. Yu Shengyan had no interest in their conversation. She sealed her hearing the moment Fu Wenqing spoke. Oh, that explains why she hasn't been reacting much. Okay. Out of nowhere, though, her distant gaze caught and lingered on Fu Wenqing's face. Fu Wenqing's demeanor, she thought, reminded her of her shijie, Lu Kexin. But her shijie lacked something Fu Wenqing possessed. Her birth, perhaps. Lu Kexin had always seemed to have a certain lowliness in her very bones, and after Fu Wenqing had injured her, her shame-fueled arrogance and savagery were more obvious than ever. Fu Wenqing was like a crackling fire, a blaze that burned magnificently. Suddenly, Yu Shengyan sensed danger. A hand wrapped itself around her wrist. She hadn't even noticed the black-garbed man's departure. Fu Wenqing wore a splendid smile. Her lips moved. The moon is very beautiful tonight, she said. This courtyard is so quiet. Yes, it was. Serenity had returned. Perfect serenity. The only sound, the rustling of nature itself, soft and peaceful. But all was not so in the Jianghu. Another bloody storm had wreaked havoc tonight. At an inn outside Yangzhou City, a burly man in a short jacket flung his bowl and chopsticks on the table, then hiked up his leg beside it. The Jianghu, he shouted. I hope I'm saying that right. Oddly. If it was peaceful, it wouldn't be worthy of the name. With that, he sat down as if nothing at all had happened. He picked up another bowl brimming with wine, downing it as if he hadn't just been yelling. A broadsword rested beside his right hand, pierced through with 5 iron hoops. They clanked against each other loudly. Fu Wenqing sat in a corner, hidden from sight by a pillar, her lips upturned in a slight smile. Sorry. It hardly made sense for the scion of a prominent Jianghu family to show up in such a tattered little inn, but here she was. Fu Wenqing's plans remained inscrutable. She glanced at Yu Shengyan, sitting silent beside her, and grinned. Do you know about what's been happening in the Jianghu recently? She was prepared to answer her own question, but Yu Shengyan spoke up. 2 key events, she said. Clever Hands Lu Qi was murdered. They say it's because he'd concealed a treasure map inside his jade guanyin. And the brothers of the Arcane Order are quarreling over a mysterious woman who calls herself the Third Young Master. Yu Shengyan had overheard all this as they were leaving the House of Valor. Fu Wenqing giggled. Just so. All this will surely send the Jianghu into an uproar, not that it was stable in the first place. Only Yu Shengyan heard what she'd actually said, but the peal of laughter Fu Wenqing let out made all the guests in the inn turn to look at her. Some of those watching eyes were admiring, others covetous. Covetous? And a few were disdainful. Two beautiful women at a run-down little inn without any male escort to speak of. It was enough to send these foul men's imaginations wild. The ones with at least a scrap of wisdom managed to restrain themselves, but some of them were drunk on lust, desperate to put their eyes and hands upon those bodies. With a series of clinks, the burly man from earlier stood up. As a swordsman, he'd never forget his weapon, but he worried it would scare the little ladies sitting nearby. He hesitated for a moment, then left his sword behind. When he grinned, his stubby whiskers quirked against the fleshy folds of his face. He looked even more hideous, with his uneven teeth on display. Ladies, where are you headed? Do you have an escort? He'd barely gotten the words out before a short little man jumped in. He was as thin and wiry as a monkey, and although he only draped an arm around him, the burly man was sent flying. The short, thin man narrowed his eyes and stroked his beard. Ladies, why not travel with me instead? Being embarrassed like that in front of these beauties sent the burly man into a rage. Hefting his sword, he clanked towards the smaller man. The massive force cleaved the bench in half with a Okay. The massive force cleaved the bench in half with a sound like thunder, but the skinny man scampered away, grinning with a hand on his beard. Now that a fight had broken out, the inn servers and landlord were quick to skedaddle. I like that they put the word skedaddle. The scaredy cats were gone too, leaving only a group of Jianghu warriors to watch the show. Doubtless they were hoping to find the right moment to pull off a heroic rescue and catch a beauty's fancy. Fu Wenqing didn't bother looking at any of them. Yu Shengyan's response delighted her. Fu Wenqing's eyes were terribly expressive. They seemed to speak without words. One glance was enough to capture the soul. The fight escalated, drawing in more and more of the inn's patrons. No one noticed. The two women who'd caused this entire thing had disappeared. Finally, someone struggled free of the chaos and asked, "Who was that woman in red?" Finally, a theory. "I think it was Lady Fu from the House of Valor." After a beat of uneasy silence, sighs of lament echoed throughout the inn. There are too many creepy men in this book. I'm getting a little tired of it. But okay. Wandering the streets of the village, Fu Wenqing looked about as if everything fascinated her. She bought a bearded I'm not saying it's inaccurate, but I'm saying that it happens enough in real life. Why are we reading it? I want to read about lesbians. Okay. Wandering the streets of the village, Fu Wenqing looked about as if everything fascinated her. She bought a beaded hairpin from one little stall and put it in Yu Shengyan's hair. Because that's what you do to your enemy. You give her a hairpin and you put it in her hair yourself. In truth, it was much too plain for Yu Shengyan, and it rather ruined the effect of her beauty. Fu Wenqing was annoyed, but she wouldn't let Yu Shengyan take it off when she was the one who put it there. Lu Qi's clever hands could probably make a hairpin worthy of you, Fu Wenqing said suddenly. Too bad he's dead. Yu Shengyan didn't reply, but Fu Wenqing threw her head back and laughed. Her peeling giggle seemed to ring with chilling apathy. Yu Shengyan looked up through her lashes. From within her lapels, she took out a rough bamboo whistle. For you. She folded it into Fu Wenqing's suddenly nerveless hands. For me? Fu Wenqing held it as if she'd been offered some priceless treasure. She beamed, utterly delighted. This was much better than any Jade Guanyin. 1 year ago, that Jade Guanyin had been stolen from the best convoy company in Guangxi. Ma San was the one who knew that Lady Fu had it. Unfortunately, he was dead, and dead men told no tales. Where was the Jade Guanyin? What secrets did it hold? All of the Jianghu desperately wanted to know. Thank goodness Lady Fu never received it. Otherwise, this would be all much more complicated. Who's saying these things? Oh, this is gossip. Okay. Thank goodness Lady Fu never received it. Otherwise, this would all be much more complicated. This is another person. If only it reached the House of Valor, I could go and ask for Lady Fu's hand. Then, if you got her, you'd get the Jade Guanyin as well. This is another person. Listen, I know Lucci died, but how did this secret get out? So a new person, a treasure map. Ah, treasure map. Who doesn't want to make a name for themselves? Who doesn't want unspeakable riches? The gossip echoed in Fu Wenqing's ears. No one suspected her. Okay. Chapter 9. Let's see what page we're on. I don't want to stop reading it. Okay, we're on page 66. I'm going to keep reading. Chapter 9, Infinite. Where did Fu Wenqing care to go? Where would she show up? No, not easy questions to answer. She could appear wherever she wanted. In the past, she'd always traveled alone. A blazing flame no one dared approach. Now, a statue of freezing ice walked beside her. Together, these two opposing energies merged into a wonderful balance. Passerby thought to themselves, Fu Wenqing isn't as scary in person. But it would be a terrible mistake to assume Fu Wenqing was no longer the same Fu Wenqing she'd always been. Provoke her, and you were still doomed, just like the men who were currently sprawled before her, wailing in pain. They were in a rundown temple. Night hadn't yet fallen, but Fu Wenqing had lit a huge bonfire. Fu Wenqing was smiling, but to the men writhing on the floor, she looked like an evil spirit straight out of hell. This is how I want to be viewed by evil men. The heat of the bonfire had sweat streaming down their faces, but their hearts were as cold as a cave of ice. Fu Wenqing's energy had them surrounded entirely, preventing any escape. The least injured among them sent a beseeching gaze at Yu Shengyan, who was meditating beside Fu Wenqing. His fingers tightened into fists. He had to risk it. The cool beauty beside Fu Wenqing didn't appear to be her handmaiden. It seemed she was someone close to her. The rumors that had been floating through the Jianghu recently convinced him that Yu Shengyan was Fu Wenqing's dearest confidant, her most cherished beloved. His lips twisted, sinister. He made of himself a glinted blade, aimed searingly at Yu Shengyan. He made of himself a glinting blade. Did he make it? I don't know what that means. Okay. Fu Wenqing remained motionless. The man despaired. Not because he'd overestimated the weight this icy woman had on Fu Wenqing's heart, but because he hadn't anticipated the choking force that emanated from her body. This lady's martial skill almost surpassed mortal limits. She could hide every trace of her internal energy, making herself appear as a talentless commoner. The man knew he was as good as dead. To his surprise, he only fell back to the ground. He didn't even reopen any wounds. Despair transformed into relief, but only for a moment before he fell back into the abyss of hopelessness. Fu Wenqing hadn't struck him. She just said 2 words, but they were enough to make every one of the men blanch. Yu Shengyan. What did Yu Shengyan mean to the demonic sect? It meant the high priestess of the Jade Water Guild, the absolute power that none dared cross. It was the same position Fu Hui held in the Light Path Alliance. No, even higher. Their lives were instantly snuffed out. But not by Fu Wenqing's hand. They'd all done it themselves. Fu Wenqing was going to let them go, but alas, it just so happened they were disciples of Black Peak Hall of the Jadewater Guild. In an attempt to seek revenge for the 4 rats of Black Peak, they'd offered insult to their very own godlike high priestess. The laws of the Jadewater Guild were inviolable. Inviolable. I wanted to read that in Spanish. I thought it was inolvidable. I don't know. Okay, we're inviolable. Transgressions were not tolerated. Fu Wenqing stared at the stiffening corpses on the ground. She sighed. What fools. That's a shame. Why didn't they think you were an imposter? Yu Shengyan said nothing. She made up her mind to change certain rules as soon as she got home. Fu Wenqing's gaze lingered on Yu Shengyan. She reached out to her, smiling slightly. Let's go. She didn't want to spend a moment longer in this filthy, blood-stained place. Violence was a constant in the Jianghu. Neither sworn enemies who sought her for revenge nor random opponents on the street were worthy of Fu Wenqing's attention. The sound of the bamboo whistle echoed across the cool autumn fields. Drifting pollen filled the air. In the distance, migrating geese changed formation, leaving only their cries in their wake. Fu Wenqing tightened her robes around her. As she stared into the distance, a listless feeling seeped into her heart. She had the sudden impulse to take hold of Yu Shengyan's hand, but she couldn't let go of her pride, even now. This is a scene break. There's so many scene breaks, like, there's so many short little scenes. Okay. The prefecture of Linnan was a good place to be. Far off a spire amidst the clouds where lies the lonely mountain peak. That's in italics. West Lake was a good place to watch the falling snow. Goo Peak was perfect for winter plum blossoms, but there was no snow now, nor any plum blossoms, only a field of rustling weeds, swaying in the autumn breeze. Fu Wenqing had traveled south on a whim, but now that she was here in Linan, she didn't want to leave. The House of Valor was far away, while Green Jade Isle was very close by. Fu Wenqing didn't like wine, nor did she like tea, but she loved fiddling with delicate little cups. Swathes of pavilions lined the shores of West Lake. From a room on the second floor, the view was a perfect scene of distant mountains and rippling water. The mist about those far off peaks looked different in each season, and the mountains in autumn were as luminously beautiful as a painting. Fu Wenqing huffed softly. Do you know what the most interesting place in Linan is? Yu Shengyan shook her head. Fu Wenqing beamed, putting a hand on Yu Shengyan's shoulder and spinning herself into her lap. Girl, this girl's always in her lap. She wrapped her arms around Yu Shengyan's neck and put her mouth to the rim of Yu Shengyan's cup. How does this work? She wrapped her arms around Yu Shengyan's neck and put her mouth to the rim of Yu Shengyan's cup, taking a little sip. Oh, she's holding it in front of her. Okay, I like one arm around her, one arm with the cup, or she like reach like all the way on the other side drinking it. Whatever. Fu Wenqing was finicky. She'd never touched a dish someone else had used. Every so often, though, she wasn't so finicky anymore. She licked her lips, then curled herself sweetly into Yu Shengyan's embrace, as spoiled as a cat. It was rare for women to seduce other women, but Fu Wenqing was an exception. The most famous place in the Nan is the Springtime Smile, she went on. Yu Shengyan, why don't we go take a look? She phrased it like a question, but she'd already made up her mind. For convenience's sake, they both dressed as men. What a handsome pair they made, one burning like fire, the other cold as a blade. The Springtime Smile lay outside the bustle of Westlake in a quiet and unassuming alley. One side of the street was lined with tattered reed shacks and starving commoners, while the other was full of wealthy nobles swimming in silk and brocade. Springtime Street suddenly grew crowded. People in rags clustered around a group of beautiful girls in pink. Lady Infinity's giving alms again! Blessings on Lady Infinity! The suffering poor put their hands together and knelt, unmoving. Nobody would have thought anything of it if they did this anywhere else. But this was Springtime Street. The young masters sent servants up to learn what was going on. Most of the crowd scattered as the mention of Lady Infinity, leaving only drunkards and those with powerful backers. The onlookers shook their heads and sighed. It was obvious this had played out many times before. Nothing would happen if they messed with those girls in pink, but if they strike the people in the alley, they're doomed. It isn't wise to make an enemy of Lady Infinity of the Infinite Halls. No, sir. These are like 3 different people. When did the Infinite Halls turn up? Can't really call them an evil sect since they're always doing good deeds and pleasing the common folk, but there's no shortage of righteous sects they've destroyed, so you can't exactly say they're good either, said a new person. The master of the Infinite Halls is a mystery. The most talented investigators can't even figure him out. New person. Who cares about all that? It's none of our business. Sure, we can't afford to make an enemy, but we should still keep our own noses clean, right? Listening to the talk around her, Fu Wenqing snapped her fan shut and narrowed her eyes. A twinge of mirth appeared on her face as she mouthed, "The Infinite Halls." Petals fluttered through the air as if spring had come again. The sound of the pipa and flute weaved together as a palanquin came flying down the street, carried by 4 girls who were clearly skilled fighters. The blossom's fragrance faded as the litter disappeared into the distance. Who was that? Lady Infinity, of course, though she's not the master of the Infinite Halls. I actually don't know who the master is, but I'm sure they weren't in the carriage. It's probably an 80-year-old man. Huh, there's so many beautiful girls in the Infinite Halls, I bet he's... The man collapsed like a felled tree. It was broad daylight, so she didn't kill him. She just stopped his tongue to teach him a lesson. Fu Wenqing turned to Yu Shengyan and giggled. The Jadewater Guild and the Infinite Halls. How interesting. How very interesting indeed. Yu Shengyan blinked. The technique they just used was a combination strike based on the Shaolin Monastery's Blossom Touch and the Tangmen School's Petal Scatter. Fu Wenqing hummed. Fascinating. She narrowed her eyes. But you know what's even more fascinating? Let's go to the Springtime Smile. What was Yangzhou's House of Flowing Gold to the Springtime Smile? There was no contest to be had, and the Springtime Smile wouldn't deign to be mentioned in the same breath. It could be a House of Flowing Gold if it had to be, but the House of Flowing Gold could never equal the Springtime Smile. Money was all it took to get into the House of Flowing Gold. Not so the Springtime Smile. Not so the Springtime Smile. That's the whole sentence. Okay. You needed more than just coin. You needed prestige and talent. Men prided themselves on being granted access, and they'd passionately defend it from anyone who sought to wreak havoc there. No one dared run amok at the Springtime Smile. Okay, I was going to stop reading, but I just want to keep going. This book has me, I'm gripped. Okay, we're going to do, let me see how long this one is. Okay, we're just going to do one more chapter. Chapter 10, Springtime Smile. The Springtime Smile had the most exquisite wine, the sharpest swords, the sweetest verse, and of course, that legendary smile itself. Mention this place, and her name was sure to come up in the next breath. Here, the finest brews took the name of the house, as did the most exquisite dishes. The most beautiful woman, too, was known as the Springtime Smile, Chun Feng Xiao. But that name was a poor fit for a woman who never smiled. At the Springtime Smile, 1,000 gold taels couldn't buy you the beauty's favor. At best, you might be able to afford a jar of that lovely wine. Every visitor hoped to charm a smile from Chun Feng Xiao, but most wouldn't even catch a glimpse of her face. Here, they entertained genius scholars and prodigy swordsmen, wealthy merchants with endless riches, and each and every one was beautiful. Any one of the guests here, plucked at random, might even be finer or more handsome than the girls who worked at the Springtime Smile. Women were uncommon patrons, but Fu Wenqing and Yu Shengyan just so happened to be an exception. The heady wine was far too rich for a poor man's blood, but it wasn't for drinking. Instead, it filled the censers. The fragrance of the wine melted into sandalwood incense, forming a new kind of perfume. Yu Shengyan sat beside the table like a statue carved from ice. Women stood ready to serve them, enchanted by Fu Wenqing's seductive smile, and then frostbitten by Yu Shengyan's freezing aura. You know what it's giving is the scene in Arcane where Vi and Caitlin go to the brothel. Okay, just lesbians at a brothel, I guess. Springtime Smile's hostesses were wise and experienced. It only took a glance for them to recognize that these impossibly beautiful men weren't the approachable sort. They retreated, leaving the two of them alone in the well-appointed room. Fu Wenqing made her way to... Oh, they're dressed as men. They're not well, whatever. Fu Wenqing made her way to Yu Shengyan and slunk into her lap as if she belonged there. So now they look like gay men. Even dressed as a man, Fu Wenqing's features retained their beguiling temptation. She reached out and looped a lock of Yu Shengyan's hair around the tips of her fingers. What does it mean, she cooed, when someone who never smiles suddenly does? Yu Shengyan knew Fu Wenqing was talking about her, not about Chun Feng Xiao. A faint smile played around Yu Shengyan's lips, just for one fleeting moment, as quick as a night-blooming flower. Fu Wenqing's eyes went glassy. She felt like she was going insane. The thought of herself as seductive, but she thought of herself as seductive, but Yu Shengyan barely noticed. She thought of herself as restrained, but the tiniest smile from Yu Shengyan could make her dizzy. Fu Wenqing grinned stupidly, pressing herself closer to Yu Shengyan's body and breathed softly against the delicate shell of her ear. If you were a man, she whispered, I'd kill you. But she hadn't said everything she was thinking. Yu Shengyan was a woman as beautiful as she was. She, Fu Wenqing, would only kill her once she defeated her. Girl, you don't want to kill her. Okay. Only women would refuse attention at a house of pleasure. Why would a woman come to such a place? A beguiling question, to be sure. And Chun Feng Zhao, was easily beguiled. Before long, the door opened with a creak, and a woman dressed in white came in carrying a pipa. Fu Wenqing was still nestled in Yu Shengyan's lap, and her eyes remained just as alluring. They seemed like two haphazardly dressed men embracing, but Chun Feng Shao saw a pair of women entwined. Yet this coolly reserved woman who just entered the room was Chun Feng Shao herself. Fu Wenqing studied her out of the corner of her eye. Her aloofness was intentional, created to distance herself from mortal affairs, which was to say, it was a carefully maintained front. Her expression was cool, but her heart burned hot. Chun Feng Shao had a wonderful bearing, but she fell far short of Yu Shengyan. But perhaps Fu Wenqing was no longer capable of seeing anyone as Yu Shengyan's equal. She sighed to herself and looked away. Oh my god, I've never read this word. We're gonna look it up. Eponymous, a person giving their name to something, or a thing named after a person. The eponymous, okay, named after her. The eponymous springtime smile and its Chunfeng Xiao weren't nearly as interesting as she'd hoped. Chunfeng Xiao plucked at the strings of her pipa and smiled. Fu Wenqing didn't see it, but Yu Shengyan did. You know, it's kind of weird. I just realized these Chinese names, they always say the first and last name. Like always. We just say the first name. Okay. Fu Wenqing didn't see it, but Yu Shengyan did. A few notes ran out, tracing out the shape of the song. It conjured a torrential rainfall or the scattering of jade upon a silver tray. Yu Shengyan's mouth curved again, this time for Chunfeng Chao. Fu Wenqing didn't like that. Yu Shengyan should only smile for her. She stood up to block Yu Shengyan's view, which brought their foreheads together, their breaths mingling close. When Fu Wenqing looked down, all she could see were those red lips, a fist tightened around her heart. She felt like she'd just downed a cup of wine. Fu Wenqing wanted to kiss her right there, amid the music, in front of Chun Feng Xiao. Xiao. Pronouncing it like Xiao from Genshin. This is Chun Feng Xiao. Xiao. She craved it in the way a traveler lost in the desert yearned for an oasis spring. Oh, if you're listening while driving, I showed you a picture. Don't crash. She craved it the way a traveler lost in the desert yearned for an oasis spring. Yu Shengyan was a sheet of blank paper, and Fu Wenqing wanted to daub her with her own colors. Fu Wenqing had succumbed. She felt like she was sinking ever deeper into damnation, but if she was doomed to fall to the depths of such a bottomless abyss, why shouldn't she drag Yu Shengyan along with her? Her eyes glimmered, veiled in mist, and filled with the redolence of passion. These are so many words I've never seen before. Redolence of passion. The cold clarity of ice had vanished. The pipa fell abruptly silent. Chun Feng Xiao's expression stiffened. Fu Wenqing laughed all the harder. She was a bewitching snake, wanting nothing more than to wrap Yu Shengyan in her coils. Chun Feng Xiao liked men and women equally, but perhaps it might be more accurate to say she appreciated beauty in all its forms. She was likewise confident of her own skills in seduction. No one could resist her, no matter their sex. Anyone she lured would take the bait. So what if they were a skilled martial artist? In the end, didn't they all surrender to the charms of pleasure? Fu Wenqing's lilting voice rang out. Chun Feng Xiao, why didn't you stay unsmiling? You shouldn't have smiled. Straightening Yu Shengyan's loosened lapels, she turned to stare Chun Feng Xiao down. You could tempt the appetites of those men outside, but you can't catch me. Everyone who loses themselves in the sound of your pipa was under your thrall from the very start. Didn't you know that? Playing that thing isn't a seduction technique. Chun Feng Xiao's expression turned freezing cold. She'd never been critiqued like this. Everyone who came to the springtime smile adored her. She'd considered herself on the same level as the Jianghu's renowned beauty Fu Wenqing. In fact, quite a few of her admirers had whispered to her over the pillows that her looks were far superior. She was very sure herself. Fu Wenqing beamed at Chun Fen Shao. I should show you, she murmured almost to herself, what real seduction looks like. Chun Feng Shao felt faint, as if her soul had slipped out of her body for a jaunt through the skies. She shook her head hard. Who are you? Fu Wenjing swiped at a corner of her mouth. Take a guess. Who else could be so magnificent? Chun Feng Shao paled, terror flicking through her eyes, along with a hint of a tearful pout. It was enough to make any ordinary man's heart ache, but Fu Wenqing was no man, nor was she ordinary. Fu Wenqing, or this is Chun Feng Shao saying it. She said, Fu Wenqing. This woman, who should have been in Yangzhou, had suddenly shown up in Lin'ang. Chun Feng Shao threw her head back and laughed, her features twisting with jealousy. She didn't want to live anymore. She feared nothing. If you ask me not to smile, it will only make me smile harder, she said slowly, recalling certain Jianghu rumors. Do you believe you're beautiful, Fu Wenqing? You don't even measure up to the woman beside you. Next to her, you're no more than her foil. Fu Wenqing's pride wouldn't allow her to be superseded. Everyone who'd ever said such things in front of her was dead, but presently there was no killing intent behind her smile. She didn't look angry at all. She shot a glance at Chun Feng Shao. Why should I care if you smile or not? Lu Qi, on the other hand, I imagine he truly regrets never having the chance to see you smile. Chun Feng Shao's face went pale. The fact that Lu Qi had come to the springtime smile had spread all over the Jianghu seemingly overnight. Lately, patrons weren't just visiting for pleasure. Many came to ask after the Jade Guanyin and the secret of the treasure map. How ridiculous. Lu Qi had sent the Jade Guanyin away. Why would Chun Feng Shao know anything about the map? There had been no news of it since last year, so why was the slightest new detail getting spread about the Jianghu as if it was the truth? Ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. People were absurd. Chun Feng Shao went as stiff as a dead fish. You're seeking the Jade Guanyin. Her voice was so dull it was unrecognizable. She could hold her own against many Jianghu warriors, but she was no match for Fu Wenqing. If she was here for the Guanyin, the springtime smile was doomed. Those passionate young defenders of the springtime smile would not risk offending the House of Valor to come to her aid, and clever hands Lu Qi's fate had begun to change many of their minds besides. Fu Wenqing grinned with an indescribable luxuriance. That Jade Guanyin was meant as a gift to me from Lu Qi. Of course I'm interested, but actually, I came to the Springtime Smile to help you. I know people have been bothering you about the map. I can tell you outright that it's real, and the Jade statue's whereabouts are very easy to guess. Ma Sun had never lost a single escort before that, and the Wei Yang Company trades on trust. How did an inconspicuous Jade Guanyin like that suddenly go missing? Chun Feng Shao nodded, her emotions churning. I understand. That escort wasn't for the Jade Guanyin at all. It had been for the treasure map. The Jianghu didn't know the truth, but the House of Valor did. And if the House of Valor knew, that meant that all 5 clans in the Light Path Alliance likely did as well. Okay. We've made it to chapter 11. I was wondering why they were just there, pissing off this poor lady that worked there. But I guess they had business. Okay. Yeah, my throat hurts, so we're done. I'm going to take a break, and then I think I'm going to read some MDZS. We'll see. We're on page 82 of 393. And I still don't really know what, like, the plot is. Like, I'm still kind of confused. Like, somebody got murdered. They think it's Lu Shengyan, but she clearly didn't unless someone's working for her. Lu Shengyan's trying to get this cure for her Shije, whose name I hate saying, Lo Keshen, who's sick, whose tendons are cut because Fu Wenqing cut them. They're looking for this. She has the treasure map. Fu Wenqing has this treasure map. There's a new form of sorcery going around that Fu Hui's worried about. That's all I got, y'all. I don't know what's happening. Unless somebody wants to explain it to me. Or maybe I don't think I'm supposed to understand yet, but okay, that's all for today. Next time I think I'm gonna wear white. I'm gonna be Yu Shengyan themed. And I'm sorry I'm so bad at like reading her lines. It's just so hard because she's been saying a lot. Like it's easy to do the monotonous ones when they're short, but when she says a lot, I'm like, how is she saying this? And I've never read it before, so I'm reading on the go, you know. Okay. That's it. I've been here for an hour. Okay, that's good timing. Okay. Now I just need to figure out how to end this. Oh, you guys should. Oh my god, I almost forgot. Wait, this is very important. Join the Discord. I will put the Discord in the description. You guys should join, and we can all talk about the book, and then you guys can know when I'm gonna go live because I don't have a schedule yet. And we can come up with a schedule or something. Maybe I will. Okay, that's all. Bye bye.